Have you ever just stopped and wondered, why do I think the way I do? Or feel the things I feel? Well, for more than 100 years, the field of psychology has been trying to answer that exact question by drawing all these different maps of the human mind. So today, we're going to take a tour of those maps, all the way from the very first sketches to the super complex, kind of like a GPS that we use today.
I mean, really, it's the ultimate question, isn't it? Why do we do the things we do? This single question has been the engine for over a century of psychological discovery, with some of the most brilliant minds trying to chart the massive and often mysterious territory of human behavior.
And I really love this idea of a map. Think of each school of thought like a different kind of map. One might be a road map, great for getting from A to B. Another might be a topographical map, showing you the mountains and valleys. None of them showed the entire picture, but each one gives us a unique way to navigate the incredible complexity of being human.
Okay, so where did all this map-making even start? To answer that, we've got to go way back to the late 1800s. This was a time when psychology was really trying to step out of philosophy and become its own legitimate science.
So, the very first attempt at a map was something called structuralism. And the goal here was, well, it was ambitious. They wanted to create a periodic table of the mind. Seriously. A guy named Wilhelm Wundt believes that if they could just break consciousness down into its most basic building blocks, every little sensation, feeling, or image, they could understand the entire structure of the mind.
But almost immediately, another school of thought, functionalism, popped up and basically said, whoa, hold on a second. It's not just about what the parts are, it's about what they do. This was led by the amazing William James, and the functionalists were way more interested in the purpose of consciousness. How does thinking or feeling or remembering actually help us survive and get by in the world? And this right here just nails the difference perfectly. Structuralism was like taking a car engine apart piece by piece to just look at all the components. Functionalism, on the other hand, was all about asking, okay, but how does this engine actually make the car go? These two totally different questions are what really kicked off the entire field of psychology as we know it.
So after those first two blueprints were drawn, the 20th century just saw an absolute explosion of new ideas. Each one was kind of a reaction to what came before, challenging the old maps and charting some seriously bold new territory.
This timeline kind of gives us a bird's eye view of the landscape we're about to travel. We start with Wundt's focus on what we're aware of. Then we're going to dive deep, and I mean deep, into the unconscious with Freud. After that, we swing completely the other way to focus only on the outside with behaviorism, before finally coming back inside the mind during the cognitive revolution. Yeah, it was a pretty wild ride.
And then there was Sigmund Freud. This guy drew a map of a hidden continent that nobody had really taken seriously before, the unconscious mind. His huge, game-changing idea was that the most powerful forces shaping who we are, our deepest fears, our secret desires, our buried memories, are completely hidden from us.
Now, what's so fascinating is how Freud pictured our personality. He didn't see it as one solid thing. Instead, he saw it as this constant, raging battle between three parts. You've got the id, which is just pure primal instinct. It wants what it wants right now. Then there's the superego, which is like your inner parent, your moral conscience. And stuck in the middle is the poor ego, the realist, just trying to broker a peace deal between the two.
So while Freud was off exploring this deep inner world, a totally different school called behaviorism came along and just slammed the door shut on the mind. Their argument was pretty simple. We can't see thoughts, we can't measure feelings, so why are we even trying to study them? For them, psychology had to be a pure science, which meant you only study what you can see and measure, behavior. This quote just captures their radical view perfectly. The mind, it's a black box, and it's irrelevant. All that matters is the stimulus that goes in, say a ringing bell, and the response or behavior that comes out, a dog drooling. For behaviorists like B.F. Skinner, everything that happened in between was just not worth talking about.
At the same time, another group, the Gestalt psychologists, were looking at all of this and saying that both the structuralists and the behaviorists were kind of missing the forest for the trees by breaking everything down so much. They were fascinated by how our minds automatically, without us even trying, organize bits of information into meaningful wholes.
And this is their famous motto, which you've probably heard before. It's so true, right? You don't see a random collection of colored pixels on a screen, you see a face. You don't hear a bunch of separate musical notes, you hear a song. Our brains are literally wired to find the pattern, to see the meaningful whole, not just the little pieces.
Okay, think about this for a second. Psychoanalysis was suggesting we're all secretly controlled by our unconscious. And behaviorism was saying we're basically just products of our environment. Well, a new movement emerged that looked at these two ideas and said, hang on, you're forgetting something really important here. Us. Our choices, our potential for growth, our own experiences. And this was the humanistic school, which felt like such a breath of fresh air. Thinkers like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow completely rejected the idea that we're just puppets. They drew a brand new map, one that put things like free will, personal growth, and our amazing potential to become our best selves right at the center. What's really incredible here is the shift to these super positive ideas. Self-actualization. That's this built-in drive we all have to reach our full potential. But to get there, humanists said we need something called unconditional positive regard. We need to feel accepted and valued for exactly who we are, flaws and all. It's just a fundamentally hopeful and empowering way of looking at people. Then we get to the 1960s, and what's known as the cognitive revolution kicks off. With the rise of computers, psychologists suddenly had this powerful new metaphor for thinking about the mind. So they decided it was time to finally pry open that black box the behaviorists had sealed shut and really start studying what was going on inside. And that's the key analogy they used. Our mind is like a super sophisticated biological computer. It takes in information, that's the input, it processes it, stores some of it in memory, and then produces a response, the output. This model gave them a scientific framework to study all the cool stuff like thinking, language, memory, and problem solving. Which brings us, finally, to today. After this whole century of competing maps, you might be asking yourself, okay, so which one is right? Which map won? Well, the really cool answer is that modern psychology doesn't choose just one. See, the modern view is way more integrated. Psychologists now layered these different maps on top of each other. So, you have the biological perspective, which is like looking at the brain's physical hardware, our genes, our hormones, our neurochemistry. Then there's the evolutionary perspective, which looks at our ancestral software, like how did developing a fear of snakes help our ancestors survive? And then you have the sociocultural perspective, which considers the world we're actually running in. How does our family, our society, our culture shape who we are?
So all in all, we've looked at about 10 major schools of thought, 10 different maps of the mind. And what we've seen is that each one is incredibly powerful, but each one is also on its own incomplete. And that really is the big takeaway here. A psychologist today probably won't call themselves just a behaviorist or a psychoanalyst. Instead, they use what's called an eclectic approach. They have a whole toolbox filled with ideas and techniques from every single school. They might use a cognitive technique to help someone change negative thought patterns, but use humanistic principles to build a trusting relationship, all while having a biological understanding of how medication might help. It's all about using the right tool for the job. So I'll just leave you with this to chew on. When you look at your own life, your own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, which one of these maps seems to fit best? Which one gives you the most useful explanation for why you do the things you do? Is it your hidden drives, your learned habits, your internal computer, or maybe a mix of everything? The answer you come up with is a pretty fascinating glimpse into your own mind. Thanks for joining me.